messy.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so welcome everyone to another discussion that we are going to have on inner transformation. And before we start today's discussion, I would like to ask someone to do our opening prayer. Is anyone willing to do it?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Go ahead, sister.
Teresa said she'll do it. Go ahead, Teresa.
Okay, go ahead, sister.
Hello and welcome to all who have joined us for this study for inner transformation. We welcome all the spirits, those in both realms, incarnate and discarnate, those who have come to inspire and guide us along, and those who are here to learn beside us. We say hello and welcome. We take a moment to center ourselves, letting go of all those things during the day that maybe brought us out of alignment with our higher selves, with the divine laws, and let us allow ourselves and give ourselves permission to rejoin, to let visualize those things rolling off of our shoulders, visualize ourselves being kind of washed clean by a light rain, preparing ourselves for the study. We clear our minds, focus ourselves, and prepare the mind to receive the lessons that are coming our way. And we ask the good spirits to help us assimilate these lessons and rejoin this study with a single mind, with harmony, with unity, and we come together in calmness and focus. We thank all those spirits who support this study and protect it, and we humbly ask your permission to begin, and so be it.
So it is. Thank you, Teresa.
And so, yes. Thank you, sister. All right. So today we'll talk about acceptance in adversity. So we'll talk about tranquility, which is something, right? I think that all of us kind of goes over in so many situations that sometimes it's easy to accept, but most of that are not. So let us just quickly remember that our first class, we talked about self-knowledge. So how important it is that we take awareness of who we are, what we are feeling, an awareness of our emotions, and kind of pay attention to the things that triggers us to do either good or do bad. So that's the very first step for any inner transformation. The second big step was first to think about our humility and pride, how we are detaching ourselves from the natural pride that we bring from other lives, and how we are learning, how we are exercising our humility for us to be more Jesus-like and learn how to understand, like how to take the courage for us to keep moving forward in our inner transformation. And then the third one is about acceptance in adversity. And what we see is that usually it refers to cases where a person experiences a situation or any condition. Usually it's very negative or uncomfortable without the attempt of changing it or even going against it, right? Like protesting or trying to escape from whatever situation. So usually this is when we avoid the acceptance. So religions and psychological treatments often suggest that the path of acceptance when a situation is both dislike and unchangeable, or when change may be possible only at great cost or risk. So it's kind of when we think about we are only going to change if there is no other way, or if the risk of not changing is too painful, or the price is too high. Usually that's the acceptance that we kind of go through. So notions of acceptance are prominent in many faith and meditation practices. For example, the Buddhism first noble truth, all life is suffering. So this is kind of inviting all of us to think that suffering is part of our life. And we know that somehow this is connected to our understanding of this is a school, and not always learning lessons are easy, right? So we kind of combine this acceptance with of suffering and lessons with what Buddhism says. Another term that we also learn from this religious aspect is the Kabbalah, that means literally acceptance. So how do we accept the situation, and how we improve ourselves for us to then work with whatever situation life brought to us. So acceptance is also the fifth stage of the Kubler-Ross model. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but this is commonly known as the stage of dying, because it is the last stage where you definitely have to either you accept and you go with it, or it's going to be like a mess in our life. So it's really about how we struggle with all the situations that we are put in life. One of the things that we have to be very, very careful is that acceptance does not mean that we have to give up to whatever situation or just be passive to something. Because in reality, whenever we are struggling against something, it's because life is inviting us to exercise any pillar or any aspect of our life that is still needs to be changed. And that's why we struggle, because life is kind of imposing to us an opportunity for us to learn and see things into another perspective. It's almost learning, it's almost teaching us to go with the flow, because life is bringing to us a perspective that we are not used to that, therefore we struggle. When we accept, we go with the flow. And in the same line of thought, Judo has a very interesting way of dealing with this energy of pull and pulling energy. So they teach us that when someone pulls us towards them, we should move in their direction instead of resisting or pulling away. We should use this momentum they provide in order to deny the power over us. So in this case, what it's telling us is to use the flow of that energy that is throwing you to one direction for you to learn that as a healing process. So I found that very interesting, because again, whenever we feel like something is uncomfortable or we do not like, is when we start struggling, because our expectations would be different from whatever situation we are going through. And then here is my first question. So does anyone would like to give us an example of when you were into a situation and you were pushed into something, and then when you decided to go with the flow, you noticed that this was way better than just going against it?
Life.
Whole life, sister.
My whole life.
Or interactions with other people, because people have different opinions, and it doesn't mean it's wrong, it just means it's different. So you agree to disagree or you just accept and say, okay. I mean, it's another learning opportunity, but most folks don't see it that way.
Yeah, true.
Do you think this is the same of looking at the glass half full instead of half empty?
Not necessarily, because you can still look at it as half empty and just say okay and accept it. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to agree with it, but you can accept it and respect the other person's opinion or outlook on life or whatever it might be. So
Yeah, and one thing that I think it's also important that we always remember is that accepting the flow doesn't mean to being passive, because we have, so what judo is teaching us in here, and this is what the spirits are um, encouraging us to think, is to use the energy that we are put through to learn the lessons as part of our healing process. If we simply are passive to this energy, we are not learning anything. And if we're not learning, that is when we are missing the opportunity, and we will be put through the same situation over and over until we learn what the message is for us. Gina, go ahead, sister.
So this puts me in the mind of charity, a form of charity, actually. When a situation comes up, and rather than get aggressive about it or upset about it, you can just, let it pass. I mean, let them do what they're doing, and just let it go,
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's a type of charity, right? So if we have to learn to be more compassionate, or if we have to learn to be more forgiving, or if we have to learn to be more tolerant, we will be facing situations that we will be tested in those situations. And then we just do as you are mentioning. This is when we are learning the value of being compassionate to our brothers and sisters.
but I think all that being said is what leads you to acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So, another very interesting way that we can also think about going with the flow is with this example of the oak and the reeds. So I'm gonna read it very quickly. A very large oak tree was uprooted by the wind and thrown across a stream. It fell among some reeds, which is thus addressed. I wonder how you, who are so light and weak, are not entirely crushed by these strong winds. They replied, you fight and contend with the wind, and consequently you are destroyed, while we, on the contrary, bend before the least breath of air, and therefore remain unbroken and escape. So again, this is another beautiful way of seeing how we can just go with the flow. So what the Spirit's telling us is that when we experience storms, we can either respond as the oak tree, fighting and contending and begging to God to remove it from our life, or we can bend and sway as the reeds do, allowing God to carry us through the wind, unbroken and ultimately stronger in the end.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have we gone through situations that we said, okay, not necessarily accepting, but mostly obeying God, right? And I think that there is a huge difference between accepting and just obeying. We obey whenever we have no way out, right? Like it's either I do it or not, but we still hold that kind of resentment inside of our hearts against that situation. Whereas when we truly accept, we welcome. And then when we welcome, we do not suffer so much. And this is exactly what God helps us to do whenever we are in a storm. God carries us through the storm, and we keep unbroken, and we ultimately end stronger than how we began. Oops. So this is also part of what Jesus told us, right? He told us, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So Jesus indicated simultaneously the compensation that awaits those who suffer and the resignation that leads one to bless sufferings as a prelude to healing. So again, it's not only about just accepting because we have to. is accepting because we know that this is what will heal whatever vices that we are bringing from other lives. So in chapter 5, item 12, we also read, "You should consider yourselves fortunate to suffer, because your pains in this world are the debts of your past wrongs. And these pains, if borne patiently while you are on earth, will save you from centuries of suffering in the future life." So we all know, that we are here for us to learn, right? We are in this planet for us to reassess some of the values that we have not evolved as much as we could, the moral values that we have to evolve. And gladly, we are all in this progress path. So when we look at those situations as kind of guardrails to keep us on the right road, it is as if we were trying to escape from the road, and then Jesus is telling us, no, go back, go back. It might be painful just for a while, but go back. And this helps us to just stay straight. So that helps us with our healing process. And Martin Luther King tells us something that is so deep and so interesting. He says, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." And there is also a saying in Brazil that if you want to know the truth about someone, give drinks for the person. Because the drink come in, the truth go out. And this is exactly and this is exactly what Martin Luther King is inviting us to think. Whenever we are in a situation of comfort, it's easier for us to navigate, right? Because we are there, everything is cool, we have control of all the situations, and we feel empowered about that. However, when we are in a situation that we are disliking or we are uncomfortable, not always we hold control of that. And that is exactly what will enable us to put our version during these challenging times. And that's when we have to be very careful, because that is the very fine moment that we decide which way to go. If we go to the path that we will transform who we are, or if we will just give up and be whoever we were in the past, and we will find the same situation over and over. And I can always think about the example of when we are in the traffic, and many people say, I get so mad during the traffic when someone just cuts me off, and I get mad and I want to start yelling to that person. That is the moment that we can decide who we want to be, right? Because if we are working on our inner transformation, we are more and more exercising our self-awareness. And when we ask support to our mentors to help us get knowledge of the things that we have to change, I'm pretty sure that we will listen that voice saying, hey Chris, do you really want to yell and curse that person? And that's the moment that we will decide how we will respond, or if we want to simply react to our own instincts. So talking about where we are right now, right? So one of the things that they tells us is about the evolution of our planet. We know that we are on planet Earth, transitioning from a world of trials and tribulations to a regenerative world. So in the early days of our planet, suffering was man's sole stimulus. We know that we had to survive, so we had to kill each other for us to survive. So that's how we created our earthly vices, because it was all about just being alive, right? And we know that it all ended up in this planet being this school of hard knocks, because this is how we learned in the past. But now things are less harsh in in the physical sense, a little bit worse in the moral sense. And this is how we are using planet Earth to also support us in this moral progress. So we know that everything progresses, not only us, but also the planet that we are. And as nature itself is also improving, everything that influences who we are right now is in accordance to our mental state, is in accordance to our moral evolution. So if Earth is passing through this period of transformation from this world of tests and attunements to this world of regeneration, what is the position that we want to take in between this transition? Are we also transitioning, or are we stick on our beginning of Earth vices, where everything that we had to do was to survive? We had to kill. We had to take care of our land. We had to have more, so because that would mean that we were successful. So all those vices that we've been bringing since early stages of Earth, now it's time for us to get rid of them. Suffering is still part of our world. Even when we become a world of regeneration, it doesn't mean that suffering will not exist anymore. It just means that our heart will be more settled to receive those sufferings. Therefore, the way that we will deal with them is going to be different. So acceptance is extremely important. It's the very first step for us to understand how to change. In all conditions, at all times, in all climates, humans have gone through ordeals. The rich person, as well as poor, suffers both in flesh and spirit. So each one of us have your own struggles. Each one of us have your own trials to go. And again, this is what will help us to help the world to transition. Another interesting thing that the Spirit tells us is that even when we understand that we can only grasp some fleeting shreds of happiness on this world, on this earth, those that aspire to a purer life and better world have some intuition whispering to them that this world is not the end of all things. For those imbued with philosophy of the Spirit, this intuition becomes a certainty. They know where they will go, they comprehend the reason for their afflictions and the cause of their suffering, and beyond the shadows and sorrows of the earth, they perceive the dawn of another life. And that allows us to be faithful. Because it's not easy to just deal with everybody's sufferings, right? Who wants to live in a world that you know that your neighbors are suffering? This is painful in so many different ways. How much can we do? And this is the moment that we realize that if we realize that we are exactly where we have to be for us to ascend our moral needs, we will start accepting that this is God's actions on us. Those that aspire pure life and a better world perceiving intuition, as I mentioned, they know where they will go. And in order to weigh the blessings and the ills of this life, in order to ascertain what is truly happiness and what is unhappiness, one must rise above the narrow circle of terrestrial existences. So again, everything that we are living here is just a grasp of our life. It's just a grasp. It's just a grasp of who we were and who we are willing to be. So one of the things that I wanted to ask now is, Does anyone have any example that you can share, that if you knew, you know, that situation, they're like, if I knew this, I wouldn't have done that, or something like this. And
I
Gina,
would've
you
known
cannot
then
say
what you-
life again.
if I
Although
would have
it's
known
life.
then, yeah.
What'd you say, Sonia?
If I would have then known then what I know now, you'd make a
Exactly.
different choice.
How many examples do we have on our lives for this?
You know, I find that to be very, very hard. In the moment, there's always this hindsight, but there's always a situation where I think about, well, if if I known what I know right now, I probably would have went with another alternative. You know, whether it was with choosing the father of my children, to how the schools they went to, or even my own education. You know, but I think right now, I think if I had known more about, I'd say, spirituality and traveling more, I think I would have done more traveling to different spiritual places, yeah, when I was younger, because of it. It's just a different education all the way around. Everybody does it different,
Yeah.
and their belief systems are just different. When I first went to Brazil, I couldn't believe the belief. You know, it was just amazing to hear different stories and the miracles, or if you will, of people's healings. You know, that just was amazing. The love, you know.
I have to say that looking back on my own life, I wouldn't change a thing, because then I feel like it helps me in different ways.
Yeah, that's true. I
Yeah.
wouldn't change none of those things, even though they were painful as heck. I
Yeah.
still, from my parents to whatever else has happened. I
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Teresa, would you say something?
Yeah, I have a hard time with this because I don't know, to me, when I try to do something like that, it feel, to say what it almost is like saying, what do I regret? In my mind a little bit. It's like, what do I regret? And I feel like it for me, it's like a little bit of an attachment of like holding on to that. And it was like, it's one of those things I cannot change, but going forward I can. But I don't know, I have a hard time with like, why? I mean, I think it's good to look back and see, wow, what did I do, and from a self-examining point. But I don't feel like it's really all that beneficial to look at it from a standpoint of, oh, what do I wish I could change? Or yeah, from this kind of like regret place. I don't know. To me, it doesn't feel like really it doesn't feel like life-giving. It feels like
Yeah, it's
a
not
little bit.
productive.
It's what?
It's not productive because,
I
Yes,
as I
think
exactly.
mentioned,
Thank
you can't change the past,
I
right?
think
Yeah,
it's
right.
productive.
Mhm.
I do think it's productive if you go back and learn something from it, because
Absolutely.
then you go a different path. That's where it's
What she was
productive.
saying.
It's
That's
not,
exactly what
you
she's
don't
saying.
have to regret anything. That's a personal choice. I regret this or I regret that. But if you say I would have done it differently, taken a different path, then we're going back to, for me, this is just for me thinking, okay, well, God took me on that path, or it was free will, whatever you want to know, or whatever you want to call it, for a reason. So whether it's pay your debt, learn, whatever it is, I think that's the different side of the coin, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think I was trying to include that in that yeah, from a learning standpoint, like I said, self-examination. But when I'm just kind of like having regrets, or I wish I would have done it this way or that way. Because yeah, sure, there are things that I look back and it was a learning experience. And I think, and I realize where I went wrong, so to speak. I did the best I could with what I could at that time. But I can look back and see where, and I knew even in my heart, but at the time I didn't know, I didn't, just where I was in life. I didn't, I don't want to say I didn't know I had other options, because I think I did. It was, it's like those situations of, how do I get from here to there? I know I need to be over here, but how do I do it? I didn't have the know-how. So
And I
anyway,
think,
that's
sister,
my
what
share.
you're saying is extremely important, because the reflection is not necessarily, if I knew this, I would have decided better. I think that the
Mm,
reflection is, if I knew this, I would have felt differently. Just in the sense of, we do not have to keep struggling with things that are placed in our lives, because these too shall pass, as Chico Xavier taught us. These too shall pass, the good things and the bad things. And sometimes we just suffer so much with a situation that not always we can change. And all the decisions that we made in the past, I totally agree. They were the best that we all could have done
mm,
with that version of ourselves. But because we took that decision, right or wrong, better or worse, it made who we are today. So, to
mhm,
your point, we must be so proud of who we are, and proud not in the sense of being prideful, but just love who we are. And we are going to talk about this. There's a chapter specifically about self acceptance, because we are all doing the best that we can. But one of the things that is important is that if we are all going through an adversity, not always this is the reason for us to just get stressed, for us not to be able to sleep, for us just to be mad to other people. Sometimes we just say, I had a terrible day and I was very rough to someone. We don't have to. We don't have to. And this is also, and this is the invitation for us to think back in situations that we were, and then sometimes we just exploded. Maybe we do
mm.
not have to explode anymore. Maybe we just have to understand our emotions and understand how we want to react to that. That is the piece of acceptance in adversity that they are helping us, because we cannot judge clearly everything that is going on for us to say, I cannot accept this situation for whatever reason. Because we don't have a clear vision of everything that happened in the past. And we know that forgetful of the past is a huge blessing. If we forgot something, is because we do not need that for us to keep evolving. So that is a nice other thing that they are helping us to remember. So let me
I want to share something, because it
please.
was very interesting. I was listening to a podcast earlier. It was a spiritist conversation. And the man was saying that, um, we kind of don't have it right about the veil of forgetfulness, because he said it is in our unconscious, our subconscious. It's because we don't focus there. And he said, we can remember. But he said a lot of people don't really want to put the effort there of because it's a lot of discipline and practice, and it takes some effort to do that. But that was a perspective I have not heard anybody emphasize. So it was new, and so I just share it with you guys as well. And it kind of does make sense. And we may, and I agree with what we say in spiritism, like, um, to think wisely. Why do I want to know? Is it just like for curiosity and for to play with, or do I have some? So I think, that is definitely a part of it as well. But I just share that with you because I think it's a different perspective that we don't hear often.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, we have
Yeah.
more information in our unconscious mind than we know.
True.
Yeah, I
True.
like that, Teresa.
Yeah, I like that too. And you also reminded me about the lecture that we were hearing from João last Sunday, that he was just mentioning about animism and mediumship. This is a great example of someone that is like in a sometimes a person is just getting contact with whatever is reminding her soul, his or her soul, and then this can manifest in so many different ways. So this it just reminded me about the person that was battling with him or herself at the time of Napoleon or something like that. So probably
Yeah.
this is something the person was focusing so much on that he or she was remembering, he didn't even know that. So that was interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. So this is another interesting passage from Jesus that says, when Job's world was falling apart all around him, his friends all thought he must have done something wrong. Even his wife told him to give up, saying, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." And he replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not accept adversity?" And that's interesting, right? Because it's easy for us to accept something that pleases us, and we all say, "Oh, thanks God." But whenever something that is really bad happening to us, we do not say, "Oh, thank God," because we just feel like that doesn't come from God. But if we change the perspective that we look into our trials and we see those sufferings at pathways for our learnings, things will start to start make sense. And then again, Chico Xavier teaches us that the pain of whatever we are going through is inevitable, but the suffering is optional. And I love that so much because we are not saying that it's not going to hurt. Whenever we have to change something, it's just like an inner storm because you are battling against who you always believed was right. And then comes life and changes that perspective. Not always we are open to that. So it hurts. And sometimes it hurts because, again, it goes against our expectation. So I would expect that I would be healthier. I would expect that that person would love me. I would expect that other person to love and accept me as I am. And then at the end, things doesn't happen this way. And then we go against, then we battle, then we suffer. We don't have to suffer. We don't have to. One thing that you want to say something, Mohsen?
Yes, I can say something too. When we have headache, that is a suffering, yes. But when we get tired and we go to sleep, we don't feel it anymore. And that is, we have a still headache. But while we don't feel it, it doesn't bother us. We don't suffer from headache. That is the body, the physical, and the spiritual. That is what Jesus says in this world. You have suffered, but when you go to the other world, there is no suffering. The word is here in right now. That is us. When we take it to our physical, to our five senses, then we suffer. But when we think about the spiritual, that we come to this point, then we don't suffer. We know that we have a lot of acceptance. Thank you.
Makes so much sense, Molson. Thank you so much. And you're
You're
absolutely
welcome.
right. Sometimes like we just don't pay attention to that anymore, and then that pain doesn't become a suffering anymore. That's very wise. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing that the spirits also tells us is that our ignorance of the universal laws alone, of our of I will go back. Our ignorance of the universal laws is alone responsible for the lack of acceptance we manifest towards adversity. If we could only know how necessary adversity is to our own advancement, we could learn to love its very bitterness. Then we would cease to consider it a burden in our existence. And friends, we know which are God's law, right? It's all written in our conscience. We all know that. But even if we have a doubt, the Spirit's book has all the laws in there. And we can study. And that's why, again, our spiritual ascendance happens with two wings. Knowledge, so the more that we study, the better, because we'll be again in contact with all those enlightening laws that help us to accept and to change, and the charity, which will always help us to put in practice the good deeds that we've always been listening and we've been trying to practice, right? Like just put them into action. The other nice and interesting thing that adversity brings is the creativity. So then there is this beautiful saying that I just loved. I think it's so cute. Homer wrote, "Adversity has the effect of eliciting talents which in proper circumstances would have lain dormant. Problems unlock your creativity." So there is this story about a chicken farmer whose land kept flooding and killing all his chickens. So in despair, he told to his wife, "I've had it. I can't afford to buy another place and I can't sell this one. What can I do?" And calmly she replied, "Buy ducks." And then instead of struggling with the fact that chickens can't survive with all the flooding, just buy ducks and everything will be all right. So of course, this is just an example, but this is helping us to think creatively. And I think that how many new things happened with COVID. I mean, just by the fact that we are all here, despite that we are all in different places, is one beautiful thing that we all got creative for us to still be together, for us to work. So the more we welcome the adversity, the better it's going to be. Then there is another example, just for the sake of time, I'm going to pass through. And then there's this other example of this French engineer that so he was traveling the Mediterranean Sea, and then one of the passengers came with a contagious disease and they had to quarantine. He got very frustrated, and then he started reading a book. And then by reading the book, he just started thinking about how to finish a canal that he could build from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea. And then all of a sudden in 1969, the Suez Canal was completed, which is something that the whole world uses until nowadays. So he used the adversity of having to quarantine with this whole crew because of the disease that the salesman got. And then at the end of the day, he did something that was really helpful, not only for him, but also for the whole world. So again, they are just encouraging us to embrace our diversity, try to use our creativity, and think about other ways that we can just escape from that. Not escape, sorry, escape is not the word, but we can learn with that situation. So again, acceptance doesn't mean to be passive. Acceptance means to learn with that experience. And this is also part of one of the 13 virtues that Benjamin Franklin told us. And I know that Sonia mentioned about them last week. If you don't remember them, and if you want me to go over, do you want me to go over the 13 virtues? Or you all know them? Yeah, it's very good. Oop, just 1 second. I took notes here. So the virtue number 1 was temperance. Number 2, silence. Number 3, order. Number 4, resolution. Number 5, frugality, which is avoid wasting things, so waste nothing. Industry, in the sense of avoiding losing time. Number 7 is sincerity. Number 8 is justice. Number 9, moderation, in terms of avoiding excesses, like being in extremes. 10 is cleanliness. 11 is tranquility. 12 is chastity. And 13, humility, for us to be more like Jesus-like. So tranquility is a very important virtue that we should have, especially because when we are calm, it's easier. And from the spiritual perspective, when we are calm, we are able to connect with our higher selves. We are able to connect with our mentors. And then we can hear the insights. We can hear the guidance. Whenever our mind is very agitated or we are not able to really connect, we cannot hear the suggestions coming from our benevolent friends. So staying calm is really important. And I know that sometimes it's difficult, it's challenging, just because we are just caught up in so many different situations. But that's why we are always invited to pray, to meditate, to be in contact with nature, because this will help us to get in contact with our higher self by finding serenity in our mind.
Kate, Kiki, what was the third one?
The third was order.
Oh, so then what was I'm missing one of them. What was the second one?
Silence. So first
temperance, go ahead.
Temperance, silence, order, resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility. You find it?
Yeah, I guess I have them all.
Chastity and humility. Those are 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a space. I thought there was one after between silence and order. Okay.
No,
Sorry.
it's that. You're fine. So one interesting thing is that they tell us that this is the cycle of acceptance, actually. So usually this is everything that happens with us whenever we encounter an adversity. So the first is we are in the normal existence, we have our objectives, we have our reasoning, and I would like to just to summarize this in our expectations. So we are living with a couple of expectations on ourselves. Then we receive whatever bad news or whatever comes against our expectations. So usually the first step is for us to deny that and say, this can't be true, this is not happening to me, why is that? And like, you deny. Sometimes this can lead us to get some aggression, and then we can get aggressive against that situation. Therefore, we ended up being angry. Get out of here, this is crazy, I can't stand news like this. From times this will become depression, because again it becomes frustration. Once we kind of digest a little bit more, oh no, this is true, there's nothing I can do, it's hopeless, I am the victim, I can't do anything. And this just creates confusion in our head, because we tried to change, we denied, we got angry, we got frustrated, and now we start trying to bargain something. So I should accept that things are not going to change, then I can go on with the rest of my life. If I stop feeling miserable, I can think clearly again and maybe even find a solution. So this is when we open ourselves for this moment of okay, so if this I can't change, I'd better accept so that I stop suffering at some point. And this is the very step. From the lens of Emmanuel in the book Thought and Life, the first step for any inner transformation is the understanding. When we understand, we are able to start changing our judgments for ourselves and for others and for situation that we are. And I feel like this is the moment that we open ourselves to understand the situation, and that's when we are more likely to go to the acceptance. Well, it could have been worse. I'll just have to make the best of it. And this is starting to look like a blessing in disguise. I'm glad this happened. So it's kind of the cycle that usually we go. And we just have to be very, very careful with the moments of anger and depression, because if we are stuck in there, this can just become a torment to our whole life. And then, you know, those, what's the word that I'm looking for? I forgot the word, but whenever we have trauma, sorry, I don't know why I forgot the trauma, but this can become a trauma in our life. So the more we get in contact with these and the more we can work with that situation, the easier it's going to be for us to go one step forward. So that's why I always like to remind us of the tools that we have available, not only in the spiritual level, but also in the physical level, with psychologists and therapists, because they all helps us to go through this process alongside the spirituality that will also help us to manage our emotions through this whole cycle.
And Kiki, I was going to say that what we just read, those are the stages of grief from the Kubler-Ross that you were saying in the beginning.
So grief is the same, sister.
Well, that's what you go through. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you, sister. So many times we wonder what is going to happen to us, and quite often we feel impotent and uneasy when thinking about events that will next occur in our life. Like, now what? What's going to happen? Like, everything happened until now, and now what? So the fact is that we are always the true artisans to our destinies, and whatever we sow today is what we are going to reap in the future. So just as we were saying a couple of slides ago, everything that we've been through brought us to who we are right now. So every reflection that we do regarding our past shouldn't be bringing to us any regretting emotion, but mostly what can I do next? How this helped me to be a better person today, and how can it help me to be an even better version tomorrow? So Eleanor Roosevelt tells us, you have to accept whatever comes, and the only important thing is that you meet it with courage and with the best that you have to give. In the book Jesus in the Home, if I'm not mistaken, there is a chapter that Jesus tells us about courage, how important it is that we are courageous in our life. So then we just do not accept and be passive to whatever situation we are going through. So learning with our experiences is imperative. And we first start with ourselves, just as we were mentioning. Starting learning to accept who we are right now, regardless of what happened in the past. I'm not saying that we shouldn't reassess our past and we shouldn't reflect on how to do things differently, but accept that happened as the best that could have happened with that version of ourselves. It's perfect, because now you have clear conscience to decide who you want to be. So I remember a mentor once sent us this message: be aware of who you are and who you want to be, and build your pathway for you to get there. And this is important. It is important that we have the self-awareness of who we are. It is also important that we have a goal, that we know where we want to be. And that will help us to understand which are the misconceptions of our values that needs to be changed for us to get there. Any comments on this one?
Well, it kind of goes back to the first question you asked us, you know?
It's yeah,
Have any regrets? I mean,
right.
this reminds me of the other night when that question was asked. I'm like, I can't even go there.
Which one, sister?
On Monday night you weren't there, but it was asked again, you know, what would you change? Or
Mhm.
I couldn't go there. I honestly, I was like, no, that's just somewhere I just can't go.
But sister, this is a good tip for yourself. You don't have to keep coming back to that if that doesn't make you feel right. But that means that there is something in you that is you have to accept.
Well, yeah, I accept it. That's the whole point. I accept everything that has happened up to this moment. And there's not, I don't have any real regrets that I could go back in my you know, years ago to change, you know. No.
You've
Yeah.
moved
I
on,
think
Regina.
That's good, sister. Good for you. Awesome.
Mm.
So allowing yourself to be loved by loving yourself is the most important part of acceptance. And what makes it extremely powerful healing tool is because there is this love in the energy that underlies all of our life. Because love heals. When you love what you are, who you are, you will find the healing that it contains. And this is referring not only to who we are, but also the situations that we are put through.
Mhm.
So embracing is the best that we can do. So they also remind us about the Serenity Prayer, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows about this one.
Yeah.
And this has an old translation, but Father, give us courage to change what must be changed, serenity to accept what cannot be changed, and the wisdom to know the difference from one and the other. Right? So it's it. Let us always be open and courageous to face whatever we have to face. God grant us serenity to accept those which we can't, but mostly the wisdom to know one another so we can not battle against something. And one thing that they tells us is when life gives you lemon, make lemonade.
Lemonade.
If you are Brazilian, we will suggest you to make caipirinha. Caipirinha is a drink that we do with cachaça. It's a very Brazilian alcoholic drink that you always have that in parties. So
Zava. Yeah.
I can teach you all one day. Yeah, and that's it, friends. So
Thank you,
I,
Kiki.
It is, yes.
I know that working on accepting sometimes it can be challenging, but it's also it frees us whenever we accept because it allows us not to be attached to something that we do not control.
But if you don't
Also
have
very-
adversity, then you the positive is that you grow, you learn.
Yes. For better or for worse.
Yep. It's like getting married, huh? Oh,
Well,
Not-
I learned the first one.
oh Lord.
Well, I just wanted to say it's in the gospel, but I can't think of where it is off the top of my head. I know I have it written down somewhere. Remembering that acceptance is when we consent through the heart, and obedience is when we consent through the mind. So it makes sense. It's like, that buying in where it's really internal instead of just analyzing, well, I should do this because it'll be better for me, or I'll, where we analyze it or whatever instead of really feeling for what is right.
Yes, sister, this is part of the Spirit's book when the spirits are asking about sufferings. Like, why do we
Okay.
suffer and then we do not accept? That's exactly what they say. The difference between obeying and resign and obeying and accepting. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us. All right. So, Gina, you want to do our closing?
Dear Father, let us give thanks to all of our mentors. Thanks to our sister Kiki. And let's give thanks to each other for being here for each other. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for allowing us to come together. We ask for your grace. We ask for you to continue opening up our hearts and minds to understand the lessons that you set before us. In your name, Father, we ask that you bless the closing of this session of our study. So be it.
So it is. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kiki.
Thank you so much.
Everyone. Thank
Good
you
night.
for coming. I see you all